Okay.
I brought you some morning wood.
It's a bit dried up.
Bit crusty.
Some attention.
Hello, good morning, and welcome back to another video. And today we're going to be doing some wood-related experiments. It is incredibly hot outside. I think it's going to be over 40 degrees today, and we've got high temperatures for the rest of the week. So we're going to be taking it a little bit easy and trying to stay inside as much as possible in the cool. But we're not just putting our feet up, we're going to be doing some experiments in preparation for one of our next projects.
So we are in what will be our kitchen. And Guy took all the floorboards up in the last video, you would have seen it. So we have all these lovely beams and we want to expose them here in the kitchen. We're not exposing all of it because we've got to hide some of the surfaces, but we're going to expose as much of it at the bottom as we can. So the side face, then the bottom face, and then a little bit of the other side face. But they're really dirty, they're really knackered and a bit old. And we don't really know which method is going to give us the look that we're after. So rather than trying it on the beams in place and potentially ruining one, we have got the opportunity, because we took all those beams out when we did the floor repair.
It's moving, you got it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep,
got it. Got it. I've got all of it.
There you go. So all of the beams and the joists and the rafters and all the structural timbers in this building are made from chestnut. And it's one of the reasons we don't get any bug damage to those beams, because chestnut is super, super hard and bugs really just don't like it. So where possible, obviously we're going to keep using chestnut. I want to do the windows and the doors from chestnut. But yeah, so we're going to experiment. This face is not very nice. With this piece of timber that we took out of the other floor. We are going to try wire brushing. We're going to try sanding with 2 different sanders and 2 different sanding pads. I'm going to try the angle grinder with these flap discs, which is what I used on the lintels before, but this time I'm going to take the safety guard off so I can get it flat rather than digging into the timber, though this is so hard I doubt we'll dig into it much. And if we don't like any of those looks, we might get a belt sander and try that, but I think a belt sander would give too much of a flat and smooth finish, which is not what we're after. These beams have so much character in them, we want to keep that character. So for example, this one has lots of nice, really pretty cracks through it that if you belt sanded it, they would kind of fade into the background. And so I would want to find a method to keep that kind of detail of the timber. But I do think they're really dirty. They should not be this color. I don't know if they put some treatment on them at some point, but we've seen chestnut should be a chestnut brown, a medium brown.
Yeah, much lighter than these are.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to do. Try all the things and see what we like the best. And then whatever we like the best is what we'll do to all of these, as long as it's not too painful.
I think it's going to be a bit painful.
And before anyone runs to the comments, I know that some people sandblast, but there's just way too much mess. And I think we can get just a gooder result by doing something by hand. I said that bugs don't really like chestnut. I can actually see a very small amount of bug damage in this, and I wonder if that bug damage happened when there was also damp damage, because bugs like damp, moist conditions. So if you keep a dry, mostly humid-free, warm house, you shouldn't get any bugs, or you shouldn't get less bugs. But these timbers were exposed to some damp and some water, and I can see some bug damage. Yeah, interesting. I mean, it shouldn't happen in such hardwoods, or it has, the prevalence is much lower in such hardwoods, but you can see some little bits just on the edges. does scratch it a bit. Takes the dirt off,
yeah,
too.
that's the dirt. Wow.
Yeah. 80 years, 90 years, whatever, has dirt. That's not a decent job.
And when you compare it to another face, it's not that different.
No. So you can really see the bandsaw marks now, which you couldn't see before. See the tiny one?
Yeah. Just get this out of the way.
Pretty dirty.
Lovely.
Need a bit of battery. The problem is it doesn't give a consistent...
Yeah. You know, when you said chestnut's really hard.
Yeah. It is working though. I mean, compare that to that to that.
Compare.
So this is where I've used this.
Brush.
This is where I've used this. And this is just where you cleaned.
Which is
a bit
still
of water.
Drying, so it looks darker at the moment.
But you didn't clean it that much, did you?
I just wiped it off.
Yeah, now it needs a bit more scrubbing, I think. Okay, I might try the normal sander
On the
on the other
face.
face.
Is there something wrong? This tool is green, not yellow.
Very old. Before we knew about good tools.
I think people might argue that Makita is good tools.
Yes, it's good. Before we chose a battery system, let's see. Let's use my left hand so I don't damage my right arm again.
Do you want a hand? No, clearly not. So I almost think we should have one face per method and do half of the piece so that we can see the difference between original and finished.
Okay, so this was cleaning and the wire brush. Completely different result to that, hey?
Yeah.
So the thing I'm not too sure on here, this has got all the bandsaw marks in it. And so we have to decide if we want to keep the bandsaw marks because it's part of the story.
Yeah, I think we do.
Or if we want to get it so that all we see is the grain of the timber and no bandsaw marks. We have plenty of original timbers to compare it to. We have more in my wood store. So I could leave this like this, and then this half I could make until there's no bandsaw mark. So it's the same technique,
okay, yes.
done to differing degrees. I think I can rule this out. Interesting, that did clean it up quite a bit just in a cleanliness.
Just cleaned with water.
This is the manual wire brushing.
Yeah, and then yeah, that last one is the drill, which definitely does leave some
Yeah,
marks.
lots of scratches. And that was using the brass, not even the steel.
Yeah. So there's your sanding with
also,
80 grit.
Yeah, I could try a finer grit.
And then that's not touched. You can definitely see a difference on camera.
There's so many bandsaw marks, and I think this will look really spectacular without the bandsaw marks. I think that is messying up the
Then you
lines
just need
and
to
the
go
tinder.
further.
Yeah.
Do you see all of the thinking and planning that goes into just sanding wood? That's why we are 3 years into this project and have many more years to go. So what are your thoughts on more sanding?
So I think that looks better. So So it's not all of the bensol marks because there's some tiny little divots, but the bensol marks up here are quite pronounced and much darker. Yeah, whereas, and this section is kind of really not done at all, where you can really see. And then there's a couple of little divots. So there's a little one here, there's one there, there's one there. There's a tiny bit left there.
Just about,
a couple of little bits. But when you're looking at a flat face, it's pretty much all gone. That's just like small scratches. Could definitely work on getting them out. It's probably not going to make much difference.
It still looks very dark though compared to the end grain,
doesn't it?
Which is surprising. So you can probably just see on the camera, on the end of the beam, it's quite light, whereas on the faces it's quite dark.
So I wonder if they stained them, but they wouldn't do that down here. There would be no reason to, unless it was a treatment, like a bug treatment, but again, they wouldn't do that down here. I mean, if you look at the ends, the thickness that colour comes in is quite significant.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know. Yeah. So I would say I really like this finish. It's nice and dark, but it's also got light patches in it. I think the flapper discs,
well, that's the next thing to try.
Take off a lot more, and then we can see if there is some kind of a treatment and if we can get that off.
We don't need the paper. Have you seen?
So that's really good for getting all the crud off. This is probably what you're looking for, right?
Yes. Yeah, so I think that is grain and I think this is treatment.
Yeah. This section, well, actually this whole face is with, I don't know what this is called, a sander. And on this end, I did it for a while, but I didn't take out all the bensol marks and all these kind of imperfections. I did a lot more of the same thing here. Now you can still see there's a couple of lines, bits. Now here's a really good example right in front of my finger, where what we think is that the potentially a treatment or a paint or a stain of some description has penetrated some parts of the timber more than others. And then this side we used the flap discs on the angle grinder, what did you say, 60 and 120. And so you can see the really light spots. I think that's the actual timber, that's the grain of the timber. Where there's spots like this dark spot, it's where there's more stain, treatment, whatever, that's absorbed into the timber, so having to work a lot harder to get that out. This was the 40 followed by this sander to smooth it out a bit. The 40 I think is too harsh. It actually leaves lots of little marks. I'm having the same problem where in some places we're getting down to the timber, so this is almost this edge right here where my finger is, and then some parts here and whatnot where the stain and whatever has impregnated more. It will be a lot of work to keep sanding until we get back to the raw material, just based on, you can look on the ends and you can kind of see that in some places it's penetrated much deeper, whatever it is.
So the big question is, how far do we want to go with it?
Exactly. I mean, this part here, which I believe is kind of the actual timber, is beautiful. It's lovely. But is it worth it? Is the question. What I might do is take one of these two and keep going and see how much work it takes to get to a unaffected piece of timber for the whole lot. And we've got 13 joists of upside down, doing it overhead. And that obviously plays a part.
And each one is 3.5 meters long.
Yeah.
This piece that you've been working on is like 30 centimeters long.
Okay. So, not impressed with the flap discs. I've tried many combinations. This is the worst. This was with the 40 grit. And it's too harsh. This is a hard wood and it's still too harsh. And it's also creating some kind of, there's actually tool marks, but like burn marks, or maybe there's too much dust in the flap disc and then it kind of, I don't know what's going on there. And then I've just used whatever's in here, 80, followed by an immense amount of using this, because this guy creates these little, I guess it just digs in too much and you get these little circular, you get little bits here, and then to use this to try and clean it up is too much. So it's taking off too much and not in an even enough fashion.
Yeah.
So I have one more test, which is to use the 120s that we have of this to kind of just really do a light pass to get the worst of the gunk off, and then go over it with this and try and get this kind of finish but slightly lighter.
And faster.
Yeah, and faster. Because this took a long time and I don't like it. Well, actually all of this I don't like. We've learned many things.
Scientifically.
Which is, this is definitely the best finish we've got, which was 120 flap disc, followed by 80 grit.
Yeah, but it's a different kind of sanding. That's why it ends up not being as, it's not harsh at 80 grit.
No, exactly.
Which is interesting.
I don't really know how to show it best. What it has done is it's got to some version of the natural timber. I don't really know if this and this is the treatment or if this is just the timber. But this finish is smooth. It shows the grain more so than when we just used the 80 Makita sanding, which is this. Much darker, much less of the, let's call it treatment again, has come out of it.
You can see imperfections here.
Yeah.
Even though this is really smooth.
Lines.
Yeah.
Probably from the bandsaw originally. So the flap disc is taking off the worst of the top layer, and then let's call this a finishing sander in this instance, is finishing it off. And you do have to go along and kind of remove the flap disc marks and the bandsaw marks. There wasn't too many of those. What it has left though, and you might need to come around here with your camera.
I think just here you might be able to see all of the texture in this from the saw, whereas this is nice and smooth in the middle.
And it's not the smoothness we're going for.
But there are still a few little divots, like here and here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite interesting.
And then just compare that with this end, which is where I just did the Makita sander. So no flap disking.
Whereas here you can see like there's some dirt and some saw marks and all sorts of other stuff. Is that right?
Oh, not that one. No.
So you can probably tell which is which, right? That is before and that is after.
I know which one I prefer.
Yeah, this one, right? Okay, some time has passed, some lunch has been eaten, and I think we have somewhat of a decision on the direction that we want to take this project. I think. Do you think? Are you convinced? Do you have a favourite?
I have a favourite. I just don't know whether it's worth the effort. I'm trying to be mindful of the fact that we have 13 beams and some lintels and some other things where a lot of the time is going to be spent with our arms above our heads, particularly the underside of the beams kind of doing this kind of motion. And the gain between our favourite and the second favourite could be debated is not worth it. But
I think they're both going to take about the same amount of time and effort.
Yeah. The other concern is this angle grinder, even with the smallest of batteries, is much heavier.
It's not the smallest of batteries.
Than the sander. No, that's the big one. So to show you, we washed it with water first. We allowed that to dry, and then we came along and put a coat of mineral spirits, white spirits, petrocasa, however you might say it. That's probably a brand name.
The ingredients say white spirit.
So the trade-off is between the finish where we use the flap disc first to get off the most of the grime and the gunk, and then use the finer sander to finish it, versus just using the sander. The flap disc followed by the sander gives a much better finish. Just the sander leaves a lot of imperfections, which I think are around whatever the previous finish was applied, whether it's a insecticide or a stain or something else. It doesn't look as good, and so the flap disc followed by the sander is probably the direction we're going to go. I think, however, as we actually get up there and do these beams in place, we're not going to get the finish that we would like, because we're going to be like, yeah, that's enough. So I think we know what we want. It's whether or not we're willing to put in the hours and hours of tedious sanding to get this finish.
Well, you know what they say.
Yeah, anything worth doing is worth doing properly.
No, I was going to say, nothing beats a real world test.
Yes, that too.
It's quite dusty.
Huh?
It's quite dusty.
That's because of this damaged timber.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe the sander would be better for that. Well, I can definitely see where you have done some work on it. And from a distance, it doesn't look bad.
It's going to be very, 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 very difficult.
To the point that it's not worth it?
I don't know. I want the result, but number one, these are different to what we just experimented on. They either don't have any treatment, the same treatment. I can't really tell because I'm too close. I don't know. I want to have a look at that from down underneath. I mean, it's much nicer than the dark, unsanded stuff. And at this distance, you don't see all the imperfections that you see when you're up there. Okay.
So I think what this is coming down to at the moment is a question of effort versus reward, and which tools give the best result that we have and that we can kind of split the work on, because so far Kylie's been doing all of the testing and I've been doing the filming, but when we get to doing this project we'll both be up on the ladders or up on the scaffolding doing the work. So I don't really have an appreciation of the effort at the moment because I haven't done a huge amount of it. So I'm going to have a go, and maybe that will help us both have a conversation about the effort side of this.
Let's see.
You're going too hard, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It's starting to burn.
You have to go really gentle.
Okay.
It's like just lightly touching, otherwise it starts digging in too much.
Yeah, that's surprisingly difficult.
Yeah. And then try flap disking underneath that one.
Huh. Yeah, that's not easy at all.
No.
So,
You haven't finished yet?
I have not finished yet, but it's so different to do compared to watch. And I don't mean that in the obvious way of this is more effort, but when I was watching you do it, it looked, I don't know how to describe it, but the way each of these machines works is very different, particularly the angle grinder, because it's like a spinning disc. You can't just push it flat against the surface to remove the material. And so you kind of need to be able to see that the edge of the place where you're working, the edge of the disc, which is very difficult, like this, from underneath with a thing in front of your face because you can't see the front of it. The sander is much easier because you can just kind of push against it flat, and it just does its thing. You just have to kind of move it along. Also from underneath as well, you can just put some upward pressure and move it along. So the sander is much easier, even though it doesn't get as nice of a result.
I'm just this is a bit too high for me, I think.
Yeah, I thought it might be. Stand to the side of it rather than face into it.
Like this.
Yeah, but maybe in the other direction. Maybe this. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
that's much more easy.
Yeah. That's what I have been trying at least.
What's that thing that those idiots on YouTube are always saying? Learn by doing.
Still getting some burn marks.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Let's see if I can sand them out.
It looks pretty.
Oh, it looks alright, doesn't it? Yes, going this way.
Yeah.
And being able to kind of see the edge of the disc much
And
better.
I think it really helps when the light is in that direction as well.
That does also help, yeah.
Which is,
Yeah, this looks quite nice. And that wasn't too difficult. The underneath is very difficult.
Yeah.
Let me try disking on the right hand side. Because being right handed, I think that helps.
That's not too bad.
Very dusty.
Very dusty. Very dusty.
Can I come up and inspect your work?
Please do.
The edge looks excellent. Not this part.
No.
Did you see all the marks you put into this?
No, not really.
Yeah. just too hard. To be so gentle with it. The underside looks good too.
Yeah.
It's really difficult.
It is.
I'm struggling with my shoulder still, and so that's not helping.
So that was a fun day. What did we learn?
We have much sanding in our future. So we've learned that there's two approaches to this that we both quite like, which is either just the sanding, but it takes a lot longer, or the flap disc followed by some sanding. And when I look at the beams, I can see that some beams need more work than others. So I think the worst conditioned beams will get the flap disc treatment. The beams that don't look so bad probably can do with just being sanded. They'll all have slightly different finishes, I imagine, because they're all in slightly different conditions and the timbers are different and so their colours are different. But it's going to be a lot of work, a big labour of love. But the resultant colour is what we were hoping for, this really lighter colour. So it's darker than an oak but lighter than a walnut, yeah. It's really nice, and I think once it's all been done and then beeswax polish, beeswax.
A wax finish?
Yeah, wax finish. I think it'll look really nice. Much sanding in the future. So it's almost like the digging project all over again, but sanding.
Yeah, that is pretty much it. There's going to be a lot of sanding in our future. Unfortunately, we only have 2 weeks in the schedule for sanding, so I think we need to go and relook at the schedule. The reason that we're doing this now, in case you were wondering that, is whilst we are nowhere near like finishing carpentry levels of doneness in this project, this makes a lot of dust, a lot of mess. And so what we're trying to do at the moment is get all of the really messy stuff done, get a new floor in above so that we can, or a subfloor at least, so that hopefully within 4 months we can move in downstairs. But now I'm starting to think that that might be pushing it, given the amount of sanding in our future. The only way to find out is to stick around and see what happens in the next episode. But that is it for now. We will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. See you later. Bye.
Bye. Holy shit.